Okay, everybody, this is Politics by Jake. I am Jake, your historian, your political commentator, and your host. And the thing that we do on this show, as I often say at the opening of each show, is to provide an overview of what's going on. Although many times I feel like I'm John Oliver, who does a show on HBO called Last Week Tonight. In this particular case, we're going to be talking about the shutdown or the end of the shutdown, and we're going to be kind of doing an examination of it from the standpoint of who did what and who's to blame and so on and so forth. And I'm not going to spare the Democrats here for all you maggots and for all of you conservatives. And by the way, I might say, if you are truly a conservative, you, sirs and madams, are endangered species, because the maggots are no conservatives and the Trumpists are no conservatives. But we do this because we know that there are people out there who want to act, and we want to give them the information that they need to act. And so part of what we do on the show is to give explicit or implicit suggestions on things that you can do, and to do the political education, which is part and parcel of Politics by Jake, in order to give you the information so that you understand the suggestions that we give. Okay. Now, I have to go back because it's such a good metaphor to open the show. I have to go back to the demolition psychosis that Trump has had. Trump has destroyed what was the White House, and he's created, part of the White House still exists, but he's created this grand ballroom, and he had this great party. I should not use the word great. It was a party of excess, representing excess and hedonism. And I talked to you guys on the show last week about The Great Gatsby, which some people have said is the great American novel by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Approximately 100 years ago, 1922, thereabouts, in which there was a rich man named Gatsby, and he gave parties. He gave parties all the time. And there's a sign that was posted on the archway or on a gigantic champagne glass, because they had those in this party. And it said, "A little party never hurt anybody," or I think it said nobody. And that's what they said in Gatsby's world too. Spectacle became anesthesia. As I pointed out last week, music and light drowned out the smell of the rot beneath the velvet. And I mean, here we are a century later, and we're replaying the same American hallucination with F. Scott Fitzgerald kind of as a prognosticator, or as a prophet, if you will. So, all right, so let's talk about the shutdown. We're going to talk about it. Probably most of the show is going to be talking about the shutdown, and I may have to bleed into another show on the Sunday show to talk about it. This, of course, is the Saturday show, November 22nd. The shutdown wasn't governance. It wasn't a dispute. It wasn't even a crisis. It was a party. It was a narcotic spectacle designed to blind the public while the machinery of power was rewired behind the curtain. And just like Gatsby's guest, we danced while something ugly happened off stage. And when the crash came, when Myrtle died under the wheels of that yellow car, you have to read the book. I'm sorry. Go read the book, or go on the internet and ask ChatGPT to give you a summation of the book. When Myrtle died, because people died because of Gatsby's parties. It can be said that the party didn't kill them, but the consequences killed them. So when the crash came, when Myrtle died under the wheels of that yellow car, the people who caused it slipped back into their money, back into their mansion, leaving the innocent exposed like a naked nerve. And that's what happened here. The Democrats didn't lose because they were wrong. They lost because they were late. You've heard me talk about this quite a bit. And on a Sunday show, if I can get through this today, we're going to talk about that quite a bit more. At the very least, they should have acted on January 6th, the day when the votes are supposed to be counted and the day illegitimacy was visible or should have been made visible in broad daylight. But they didn't do that. They could have used the 14th Amendment, Section 3, which states that anyone who's guilty of insurrection, and he most assuredly is. And, you know, I have people who come on my YouTube channel because the show is available here at KCAA. You're listening to it on KCAA, but people are also listening to it on YouTube, and it's on Facebook, and it's on iHeart, and it's on a bunch of places. I actually say wherever you can listen to it on kcaaradio.com or wherever you get your podcast, because essentially that's how it works out. But I have talked about this, and instead of acting on January 6th, the day we're voting, and as I said, I have people who say, oh, you know, they quibbled. They say, oh, he wasn't found guilty. Yes, he was. He was found guilty by a high court, not just a low court, but a high court of competent jurisdiction. He was found guilty by the state Supreme Court of the sovereign state of Colorado of inciting and promulgating and prosecuting an insurrection. And as such, the 14th Amendment says in Section 3, a priori, it doesn't say a priori, but you automatically, that creates a taint upon you. You're an insurrectionist, and you automatically are ineligible for any public office. This is just not president. You're ineligible for being a dog catcher, if there is such an office. And it's federal and it's state. And the United States Supreme Court, predictably, twisted itself in knots trying to get out of this one, and they didn't do it. But they're political, and unfortunately, they're corrupt. And they did. They twisted themselves in knots. And they came up with a stupid decision. And it is true that the way the legislators wrote this amendment, there was no requirement, and this is kind of the marvelous thing about it, because we want to think that the legislator in those states, that we're much smarter than they are. No, these were smart men. These were smart men. These were learned men. These were intelligent men. These were men who understood the English language. They were okay. And they did not say in Section 3 that there has to be a finding, and they knew law, most of them lawyers, just like now, that there had to be a finding, a judicial finding, that anyone so indicted would have to be found guilty of committing insurrection. And, you know, you can say, oh, well, you know, this was in the time of the Confederates, and these people were Confederates, and that automatically makes them guilty. I'm fine with that. But I like to think, and I do think, that these Reconstruction amendments, because the 14th Amendment is one of the Reconstruction amendments, were progressive, and that the legislators who wrote this thought that this would apply to anybody, not merely people who were Confederates and engaged in that certain kind of insurrection. Okay? And what the Democrats should have done is they should have acted on January 6th. And the lack of action on January 6th is startling. It's shocking. Not one Democrat, not one, not Bernie, not Alessandro Ocasio-Cortez, not one of these supposed firebrands got up and called for a vote of acclamation, because the only way that this taint can be removed, this taint of insurrection, can be removed so that you could hold a public office is for there to be a 2/3 vote, an acclamatory vote in the House, not merely in the House, but in the Senate also, absolving you of this taint. And this should have happened, but not one Democrat did that. And the reason I am told why they didn't do it is because it didn't test well in the polling. And this is part and parcel of my problem with these Democrats that I've been talking about. And I am a Democrat. They should have acted on January 6th, the day the votes were counted, the day the illegitimacy was visible in broad daylight. And instead, what did they do? They engineered a shutdown after the damage was already done. They negotiated veritably, literally, I take that back, not literally. They negotiated with, as it were, arsonists while the house was burning. So, referring back to Gatsby, the party didn't kill anyone. The denial did. And that's where we begin. After a few commercial messages, and we'll be back, and this is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. And thank you, Twain Consulting, for those commercial messages. So, a little party never hurt anybody. That's the lie that America tells itself every time the music gets loud and the lights get bright. And just like in The Great Gatsby a century ago, the spectacle becomes the drug. It's a way to stop feeling the rot crawling up through the floorboards, because the truth is this. The shutdown wasn't a policy dispute. It wasn't a budget battle. It wasn't Washington dysfunction. It was a weaponized spectacle, a narcotic, a veritable Gatsby party thrown by people who know you're easier to control when you're dazzled. And the Democrats, well, they arrived late to the crime scene. And they arrived clutching the wrong tools. So let's walk the architecture. In Gatsby's mansion, Daisy walked into the party like nothing was wrong. She adored the glow, the music, the illusion of abundance, but she never intended to pay the bill. The entire novel is an autopsy of the American dream, a dream where wealth protects the guilty and buries the innocent, a dream built on denial. If the lights are bright enough, maybe no one will see the rot. That's exactly how the shutdown functioned. A bright flash, fiscal responsibility, principled stand, government excess. Meanwhile, the real machinery, the courts, oversight, maps, election administration, was being manipulated behind the scenes. The shutdown was a smokescreen, actually. It was the party. It was the narcotic. And here's where the Democrats lost the plot. Their strategy should never have been to engineer or endure a shutdown. If I get to it, material-wise, I'll give you a presage of it now. This should never have happened. The Constitution does not allow the debt of the United States to be questioned. There are no shutdowns. You pay the debt. So this is violative of the 14th Amendment also. You should read it. It has a lot of good sections in it, 5 sections. And that is one of them. Their strategy should never have been to engineer or endure a shutdown. The time to act was January 6th, the day of the Electoral College count, the day the insurrection unfolded, the day the foundation of Trump's presidency could have been confronted unalterably and skewed and smeared and denigrated for people to think about going forward head on. An unconstitutional and illegitimate presidency. And January 6th wasn't just a mob scene, it was acclamation day. The constitutional moment when legitimacy is either affirmed or exposed. And, you can say it should have been done sooner than January 6th. I would say that, yeah. But certainly, if there is any appropriate day to do it, acclamation day would be the appropriate day to do it. And that's, of course, January 6th. That was the hour to bring forward the procedural illegitimacy. That was the hour to force the record. That was the hour to assert this fact. This presidency is invalid from its inception, a priori, by its own contradictions. But instead, well, the Democrats blinked. They played for normalcy. They trusted institutions that were already compromised. And once you miss the moment of revelation, you can't create it. You can't say, okay, well, now we're going to do January 6th and do it. I mean, you could do it, but the moment to do that would have been most appropriately January 6th. And they can't recreate that again because it's November 22nd as I speak these words. All you can do is chase the fallout. And, Trump, he plays the architecture because he's calculating to destroy the United States. And Kevin Roberts and all of the other happy little loonies in the cabal, the Trumpian fascist cabal, they're after the architecture. They're after to destroy the United States. But the Democrats, they're playing the narrative. Trump world doesn't debate, they build, because they know that the people aren't buying, just like the Russians with communism. Putin knows the old people in Russia know that nobody wants what it is that they're selling. Eastern Europe doesn't want what the Russians are selling. Many of them have been occupied by the Russians before when they were the Soviets. They know how brutal they are. They know how much their socialistic, communistic ways don't work. And they don't want it. It's the same thing here. The people don't want what Trump is selling. So instead, the Trumpians build structures, maps, courts, rules, procedures. They build choke points, no discharge petitions, no reconvening, no floor votes. They build insulation. They build legal shields. They build procedural traps. They build messaging walls, just like they're doing with the Epstein files. We haven't gotten to that yet. I don't know that we're going to get to that all this weekend. But the recent vote, which Trump seems to approve, and the bill that he signed with regard to the Epstein files, you think he's really going to give you all of the stories that are out there? You should go on Instagram, for example, and listen to Michael Wolff. He knows all of these things, and he testifies to all of these things. There are many, many people who have testified that Trump was basically in this with Epstein, this pedophile ring, up to his eyeballs. Do you really think that that's the stuff that Pam Bondi, Florida's former corrupt attorney general, and now the corrupt attorney general of the United States, do you really think that that's going to be released? Guess again. Okay, and we'll talk about that more. I don't think we're going to get to it today. But so this is what they do. This is stage 2 of the duck and cover on the Epstein files. To appear to agree with Congress, they milked stage 1, which was basically to deny and to stop and to refuse. They milked that as much as they could. Now they're in stage 2. Okay? All right. Like I said, they build insulation, they build legal shields, they build procedural traps, they build messaging walls. No floor votes, no discharge petitions, choke points. You see? And the Democrats answer with narrative, stories, statements, press releases. I mean, look, I'm using the metaphor or the story of the Great Gatsby as a metaphor for this. So in line with that, Gatsby built a mansion. And why did he do it? Well, he did it to win Daisy's love. He had parties every day of the week. It was all to win Daisy's love. Trump is building a procedural fortress to ensure that he can't lose power. And the Democrats did the political equivalent of bringing a knife to a gunfight. They brought a speech to a structural fight. So, at this point, I think probably we ought to take a break, and then we'll go on with the next section of this. And this is Politics by Jake, and we will be right back. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, this is Politics by Jake, and we're back, and thanks as usual to Twain Consulting for those messages. The shutdown was a weapon. It achieved 4 things. Number 1, it froze oversight. The DOJ, the agencies, the investigations. Number 2, it choked administration. No regulations, no enforcement. Number 3, it weakened public confidence. See? They can't govern. Number 4, it distracted the public. A glitter bomb thrown in every direction. It was never about spending. It was about disruption ahead of 2026. The shutdown was a sledgehammer swung at the foundation. But because the Democrats acted late, they were always back on their heels negotiating with a movement that didn't want policy, that wanted powerful. They made the mistake of thinking that the Trumpists want to govern. They don't want to govern, not in that particular way. They just want power. When Myrtle died, getting back to the Great Gatsby, I'm going to go back and forth when you hear me there. I'll try to refer you so you know which way I'm going. When Myrtle died under the wheels of Gatsby's yellow car, Tom and Daisy retreated back into their money. Tom was Daisy's husband. Gatsby was left exposed. The only person who paid was the dreamer, the believer, the one who thought desire could overpower reality. And in America, the same thing is happening. The people who engineered this shutdown will never feel the consequences. They're insulated. They're protected. They're shielded by wealth, by position, and by proximity. But the country? The middle class, the worker, the retiree, the person watching their rights evaporate literally right in front, right before their very eyes? Well, they're Gatsby at the end of the story. They're the ones holding the wreckage. They're the ones who believed too long. They're the ones paying the bill that Daisy never intended to pay. Because the shutdown didn't kill the country, the denial did. Because you see, America isn't dying from what happens in the dark. America is dying from what happens when we refuse to face the light. And this is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. If you think owning things in your own name keeps you in control, think again. In today's world, lawsuits, taxes, and predators are everywhere. That's why the smart money hides in plain sight. We help you to build legal firewalls, LLCs, land trusts, private contracts that protect your assets while keeping you invisible. Call Twain Consulting today at 310-997-2204. Find us on Facebook at Twain Consulting. That's facebook.com/Twain Consulting. Protect what you've built before someone else takes it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. So, all right, and this is Politics by Jake. Let's go through this mechanics. There were always negotiations going on, possibly in the Senate Appropriations Committee. The money people, that's the money people. They were negotiating amongst themselves, starting quite early on, to maintain a kind of go-to or reserve capability to essentially put an end to the government shutdown if the situation had matured to that. Now, let me say, and I said this earlier in the show, but I'm going to say it again. Let me say this. I do not support this attempt to end the government shutdown right now, and I'm going to try to explain why. I think there still might have been ways to maneuver to minimize the damage, and I think a lot has been accomplished. This is not a nothing burger, and I'm going to go through some of that. This has it has set the stage for another series of battles at the end of January and then in October, because there's going to be another one of these. This bill that was passed, this is just for 3 months. This is going to happen again at the end of January. And then it's going to happen in October, which 2026, that's going to be the midterm election campaign. And the one in October, of course, perfectly timed to portray in the starkest belief the killer cuts, the genocidal austerity that you hear me talk about, because that's what they're after. That's what the Republicans are after. That's what the Trilateral Commission is after. That's what people like Obama and Carter were after. Yeah. Listen to the show. I talked about it on the last show. I'm going to try to talk about it again on tomorrow's show. So listen to tomorrow's show, too. If you think, what is Jake Carter? Obama? Genocidal austerity? Yes. Genocidal austerity. Genocidal thrown around like crazy. Well, okay. Let's throw it around here when it actually begins to fill the bill. Genocidal austerity is if you strip large parts of the people of any access to health care. It doesn't happen immediately, but people get sick. And it happens. If you were to wipe out all of the government health care, you'd be up in the 40,000 to 50,000 range. Let's say you went back to the pre-Obamacare levels of access to health care, okay? There it was about, I think there's a Harvard study on this, it's about 40,000 plus. And of course, the population, bigger now than it was then. You might get up, in that calculation, you might get up to about 50,000. But of course, knocking out Obamacare alone wouldn't get quite that high in terms of the death toll. These are, of course, horrible statistics. So we now have this attempt to put the end to the shutdown. The vote in the Senate was 60-40. It was the minimum necessary to end the perpetual filibuster in the Senate that you may have heard on the corrupt, controlled corporate media, or maybe on some of the other podcasts that you listen to, talk about how Trump wanted the filibuster to be destroyed and to be removed from the Senate so that it couldn't be used anymore. And there's always been an argument about this. There's pros and cons to the filibuster, but that's what the Democrats were doing. They were perpetually filibustering in the Senate so nothing could be done. And this was, of course, like I said, the Democratic faction, and that is 52 votes, plus 3 Democrats, 2 Democrats and 1 independent, Angus Kane of Maine. But 3 people from the Democratic caucus, if you want, who have been voting with the Republicans the whole time. And it was always 55-45. But that's not enough for this. It has to be 60. And so that's the filibuster. And that went. It did proceed, though, and they voted that way. But then it took 5 more. So let's just go through. And I know my colleague Keith Olbermann and some others have been talking about these people who are traitors and so on and so forth. Yeah. Let's just go through who it is. You've got the faction voting to end the shutdown of the government. It was all Republicans, plus Senator Angus King of Maine. Just talked about him. This is the independent former governor of the state, I think. And he voted with the Republicans, voted to end the shutdown. Cortez Masto of Nevada, and Fetterman, he is the unsound mind of Pennsylvania, who he's a troubled, I think he's a troubled person. And that got them up to about 55 votes. And the change that had occurred over the weekend when this was all going down, I would say, it occurred over the weekend after the Supreme Court in the person of Ketanji Jackson, unfortunately and disappointingly, and once again there are arguments about this, but I'm not going to go into those now, agreed to let the federal government, the Trump regime, withhold money for SNAP. This is why you hear me say that you have the 6 MAGA justices on the Supreme Court, and you hear me say, and I'm not so sure about the other 3 who are supposed to be the liberals or the progressives. It's because of stuff like this. Ketanji Jackson agreeing to let the federal government, which is the Trump regime, illegitimate, withhold money for SNAP for food stamps, while the case is wending its way through the various, I guess, First Circuit Court of Appeals, Boston, and then it's going to come back to the Supreme Court, and so forth. And you know, while the grass grows, the horses starve, as Lincoln used to say. And the point of this is that this was a depraved decision. This is like... And again, this is another reason why I say this. This is like when Alina Kagan, at her 2010 Supreme Court confirmation hearing, said, we're all originalists now. Originalists believe that nothing that is not in the original Constitution is law. And they have, there's textualism, there's originalism, they're like kissing cousins, and they strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. And Elena Kagan is supposed to be one of the progressive justices, and yet she said this. So in other words, you have women voting out the window, you have all sorts of things out the window, you have chattel slavery, that comes back because that wasn't in the original Constitution. You see what I mean? This is not, and you look at this, and then you have Ketanji Jackson, who's an African-American woman, actually supporting the idea that the Trump administration, people are starving, or were starving, are starving, were starving, and yet you have this kind of decision coming forth from a so-called progressive or liberal justice. Do you see why I say the things that I say about these so-called progressive justices when I say I'm not so sure about them either? Okay, good. So you get it. So this was a depraved decision. This is not what you want from a Democratic Party nominee to the Supreme Court. This was a real disappointment, but it confirms what I've been saying. If you want to condemn something, condemn that. But that's what it was. And I think that is what tended to push this whole situation over the edge, to the point where we have the following Democrats who then joined Republican forces. But they joined it with a difference. They did not simply accept the bill which came from the House and which was Looney Tunes on the Senate side, had been trying to get them to Democrats to approve of. We got up to 14 rejections of that bill, and that bill's off the table now. And what passed is not that bill. So who did we have? It was Senator Kaine of Virginia. He's not up next year, so he considers himself safe. Somebody who represents a state which has a very large proportion of federal workers, along with Maryland, although nobody from Maryland joined in this effort. So we have Kaine. We have two from, in addition to Cortez Masto from Nevada. We've got Jackie Rosen of Nevada. We have Durbin. Now, Durbin is leadership. Durbin is the number 2 Democrat. It's Schumer first and Durbin second. And then Hassan and Shaheen, and they're both of New Hampshire. So interestingly, Nevada provides 2 votes. And the New Hampshire situation provides 2 further votes. So that made it 60. And you'll notice that Chuck Schumer voted against the so-called compromise. And it has also been condemned by Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader in the House. And we'll come back in a minute, a couple more messages, and we'll talk about what the content of the compromise was. And this is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. And this is Politics by Jake, and we're talking about the compromise bill. And I ended the last segment with the question, what is the content of the compromise? Well, it goes pretty much like this. Let's see here. First of all, the future progress of this thing, where is it going to go now? So it passed on the 10th, passed the Senate 60-40, went to the House on November 12th. That was Wednesday. So we got a bill coming out of the House, and that bill restarts the government. It does not do anything to assuage the crisis of the subsidies. The tax breaks that have been provided during the pandemic by Biden in order to get more people equipped with medical care, Obamacare, those were expiring because they had been limited in time, partly because of the reactionary Republicans were not going to go for a permanent extension of those things. So this was not a choice that the Democrats were glad to make. It was something that was forced on them by the tight-fisted kinds of austerity ghouls, and I refer to as austerity ghouls, that you have on the Republican side. So that situation was ending. And the goal was, and the goal still is, to force the Republicans to remove that provision from their bad, bastardized bonanza for billionaires, and that's going to come up again in January when this bill expires. I call it the bad, bastardized bonanza for billionaires. The 4 Bs. Get rid of that. Restore those extra subsidies that had been put in during the pandemic. And of course, in the current atmosphere of generalized inflation, thanks to Trump and his fakakta tariffs, now it's necessary. So don't say, oh, that wasn't necessary then, but it's not necessary now. It's more necessary now than it was in terms of just the money calculation. So that is untouched. So in other words, there still has to be a solution to that. And as far as I can see, the Democrats would have every reason, every interest to keep fighting on the Obamacare subsidies front. The Republicans, reactionary or worse, fascist austerity ghouls, they have been attempting to abolish Obamacare. We're up to now almost 75. Can you believe it? Almost 75 separate attempts or something in that range. Like I said, almost in between 70 and 75, let's see. Moving towards 75, let's say. That probably counts for one to abolish that. And all right, so don't let that happen. And that, of course, would be like taking Social Security away from FDR or Medicare or Medicaid away from LBJ. It would be a complete loss of political capital. And I don't think that will happen. In other words, there won't be any permanent peace on that. This is just a momentary tactical situation, a tactical reverse if you want. So that is not touched. That is not solved. That hangs over the entire situation, to be sure. However, what do we have? There is a vote in the Senate guaranteed during the month of December by the Republicans. We'll see what their word is worth. And in this case, it's Senator Thune, the one that you just heard me a couple of minutes ago called Looney Tunes. The deal guarantees a Senate vote to extend the Affordable Care Act subsidies in December. Now, of course, you'd be a fool not to see what the Republicans are going to do. The Republicans are going to vote? No. That's what they're going to do. They're going to vote no. And it's clear. The advantage of that it's not exactly worthless. And this is kind of what I'm trying to do to make some sense out of what we're talking about. Because people talk about how the Democrats caved. The advantage of that is not necessarily worthless. At a certain point, people were starving. And you had an African-American woman Supreme Court justice who was going to facilitate that. And at a certain point, you have to consider the people and you have to go ahead and deal. So, and that's basically what Schumer did and this other group did. And so I am loath to call them traitors or things like that. I don't want to do that because it's all politics and there's all priorities. And when people are starving, you've got to be seen as the adult in the room. You've got to be seen as the person who is acting. So that's not exactly worthless because you got them, and going back to the Obamacare, you've got them on record then in a recent vote showing exactly what they think of you. So if you're part of the 25 million people, for example, and families, different combinations that are getting health care through Obamacare, this is just Obamacare, then you know exactly what those Republicans think of you. And that's important. That's a great moment of clarity that is being forced upon the Trump fascist cabal. You've made them not dodge the issue. You've forced them to go on record, and they're going to vote against it. And that's a lot of the maneuvering in Congress is designed to get, particularly Republicans, the reactionaries, to vote for something horrible that they don't want to be associated it, but they want it to go through in the dead of night. They don't want you to know. And you've heard me talk about Ron Paul, Dr. No, who was against any appropriations bill until he would insert a measure in the dead of night that was something that he wanted. And then he'd vote against the bill as it passed the following day with Democratic votes. It's that kind of stuff. So this is a substantial thing. However, this is not a solution. There's no guarantee. There's no commitment by any Republican austerity ghoul to vote for the restoration of the subsidies during December. However, remember, the enrollment of the Affordable Care Act keeps going. until January 15th. So there is some time to change that. So that remains open. Very important. 4,000 federal employees that have been laid off on the orders uh, of Voigt, I guess. That's the same guy. Um, that guy, the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget Chief, one of the main ideologues, honestly, of the MAGA camp, he fired those 4,000 people quite early. Seems like weeks and weeks ago it was. So they're going to be rehired. They're not going to be permanently out of work. 4,000 federal employees laid off, fired during the shutdown, will be rehired, and they will be made whole in terms of their back pay. They're going to be granted their full back pay. Office of Management Budget is prohibited from implementing mass layoffs of any federal workers until January 30th. So at least a truce on that front. Get through the holidays. The Government Accountability Office will be funded at its current level, which is a rejection. It's a change from the previous House Republican MAGA bill, which was designed to gut the Government Accountability Office, because the head of that is the only government official who can sue the president if he attempts to do things like rescissions, impoundments, in other words, refusing to spend the money that Congress has been ordered to spend, that Congress has ordered the president to spend. So you've got all that. So the current issue right now that I've talked about already a little bit is the 42 million people in this country who need to get what used to be called food stamps, currently called SNAP, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, I guess. So SNAP is there. And Trump has been talking about abolishing SNAP. And in this case, he won't be able to, at least within the framework of this deal, which, of course, will, if he tries to do it, then will guarantee a huge publicity blowback against him. The political price for doing that has now gone up, and that's important. So food stamps are funded through the end of the fiscal year, which means funding through December 30th. On October 1st, no more, but that's a new fiscal year. I'm talking about 2026. And that's when you got to have a budget, a new budget, or at least a continuation, no matter what else you do. And there's been actually a slight increase. There's a slight increase in the amount of money that each person gets. The average payment is something like, 180 or 185 right now. That means per person per month. And what you think that means? That means $2 per person per meal. So breakfast, lunch, dinner, $6 a day times 30, 180. Or if it's 31, then 183. That has been slightly increased. Again, Trump will not be able to abolish food stamps. We need to see that he had been talking again about getting rid of it and getting rid of food stamps. So that, of course, is absolutely to be avoided. And it has been. And it's a matter that's been brought before the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, I don't know, I don't think that they like it that SNAP is going to be abolished. I think that they have enough sense to know that that can't happen, and that if there is a government shutdown, and they're all illegal, all the government shutdowns are illegal. The 14th Amendment doesn't allow it. You pay the sovereign debt of the United States. You don't shut down and not pay it. But this is the way these things get resolved, because this had never come before the court before. It had to come before the court. So that's why you're seeing that. And it's a grim calculation. And what's worse, 42 million people are in danger of starving now. This is why honestly, this is a significant reason why there was the cave-in, because that's where you were heading. If you don't have that, then maybe the SNAP program is completely abolished. Because remember, Trump always regarded the moments when Congress is out of town or paralyzed or shut down. He's always regarded those as the golden opportunities for him to come in with killer cuts. And this kind of brutal, savage austerity that he likes to impose. He likes this. Dr. Russell Razak has talked about this. I won't be able to get that in the show because we're almost done. But I'll talk about that, how he enjoys inflicting cruelty and mayhem on other people. He enjoys it. There's a psychological aberration in him, this kind of brutal, savage austerity that he likes to impose on the lower, as he sees it, on the lower orders. But this has now been avoided. So it was either 42 million people go into the danger of starvation now, or 24, 25 million go into a situation with no medical care starting in January. So if you weigh those two, I think it's not a completely unreasonable calculation to say, well, we ought to save the 42 million now. Because how long does it take to starve? 40 days, 50 days? I don't know. But certainly in November and December of this year, at a time when want is most acutely felt and abundance rejoices, that's when it's going to really, really hurt. And of course, it's going to hurt physiologically even more than psychologically. And you've still got the chance to fight it out in the coming year, or indeed in December in the lame duck session. It's not quite the lame duck session this year. That'll be next year. So there we go. And remember also, as I said, the Supreme Court really played a dirty role in this. And that's no surprise. But I was not shocked, but disappointed to see Ketanji Jackson, this African-American black woman, be the one who said on that Friday night, let me just go back a little bit. Remember on Halloween, we had the upstanding judge, John O'Connell, in Rhode Island, who put out an opinion, federal district judge, Rhode Island, saying, administration, Trump regime, pay full SNAP benefits. Pay the full SNAP benefits. They appealed. The federal district judge, can you imagine? No, we don't want to pay, so we're going to appeal. We want the people to starve, so we're going to appeal. And they appealed. Unbelievable. So the federal district judge was told by the administration, start paying. But damn you, start paying the people so that they don't starve. But along comes Jackson and says, no, no, no. We're going to suspend the food payments until this goes through our wonderful judicial system. I mean, come on. So honestly, I think that's pretty much of a scoundrel. Somebody needs to give, and I do it, Politics by Jake, weekends, kcaradio.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Cheap plug. Somebody needs to give a good talking to those three so-called liberal justices and remind them and say, look, you're not here because of your pretty face. A lot of money and effort was put into this that might have gone to somebody a little bit closer to the people than you are, a little bit more radical. All right, and this is about the end of our time, and I will be back on Sunday, and I welcome you who are not watching football. But the great thing about the digital, of course, the digital world that we live in, is you can watch your football, and you can come and go to kcaradio.com or wherever you get your podcast. And pull up Politics by Jake, and you can listen to these other very important things. And so until tomorrow, have a pleasant weekend, and we will see you once again tomorrow in about 24 hours. Bye now. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine being invisible to creditors, identity thieves, and lawsuits, protected and secure no matter what. Virtual invisibility uses proven business and legal strategy to shield your assets and your privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind, and that includes you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control today. Call 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting, and make yourself truly untouchable. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. This is Jake, here to tell you the world is on fire, only you're not being told who actually lit the match. Politics by Jake, Mondays and Fridays at 7 a.m. on KCAA.